Welcome back to Beyond Funding. Today I'm excited to be joined by Michael Sheppard, Executive Director for the Cathedrals Workshop Fellowship, which is an association of 14 Anglican cathedrals that provide education and training in the crafts that maintain our cathedrals and other historic buildings. Today we're going to be talking a bit more about the CWF's work, why training in traditional crafts is so important, and our exciting new partnership programme. So Michael, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Michael, can you start by telling us a bit more about CWF and its aim?
The Cathedral Workshop Fellowship is an association of 14 Anglican cathedrals up and down the UK. Furthest north is Durham, and furthest southwest is Exeter, but we have many in between, including Gloucester, around the corner from your offices here. And we are validated by the University of Gloucestershire for our qualifications. So we have two qualifications. One is the Foundation Certificate in Stonemasonry, which is a level 3 equivalent, and we have a level 4 and level 5 foundation degree. And there are 3 pathways for that: a stonemason, joiner, or stained glass conservator pathway. Any of our cathedral members have their trainees within their works teams, and they come across to us as students, and we train them in those particular pathways with that qualification. Of course, our aim is to ensure that the cathedrals are having the best training that they can possibly get, because of the significance of the buildings of which they're custodians for. But also, those individuals go on to help contribute to the CWF in the future. And of course, some leave and work in the wider sector as well. So, it's a benefit for the wider heritage sector as well as the cathedrals in their environments.
Brilliant. And it would be good to understand what are the biggest challenges that the heritage sector is actually facing at the moment.
Okay, so the skill shortage is the number one issue at the moment, and it's been talked about for many, many years now. And I think, unfortunately, because the way that apprenticeships work and the necessity for employers to have such a long-term investment, both financially and time. So, if you imagine an apprentice is coming into your organization, you've got a big financial outlay to train that person. There's a lot of unproductive time, and there isn't the loyalty anymore. You used to have the gold watch policy. If somebody would be working somewhere for 50 years, they would have been an apprentice and worked all the way through. That's just not the way we work anymore. So to have that large capital investment and time investment, you need to make sure that you've got that apprentice there. It's not just a trade, as in, and I'm not being derogatory in that as far as general construction, but you have a higher level of academic training as well that goes with it. And so when you're looking at a training program for a typical apprentice, you're looking at 5 years at least. So it takes a long time for those individuals to get to where you need them to be. Which is part of the challenge, but also it's encouraging people to get into that craft in the first place. Society at the moment is very quick, fast, everything's available. We're certainly seeing a reduction in resilience in individuals because they're not anticipating how long it takes to be fully trained in these crafts. So you have natural wastage in that sense. People lose interest or realize that they're not going to become rich overnight, or YouTube stars because they're not getting that from that type of craft. So that can be quite challenging as well.
Why would you say that training in these traditional craft skills is so important for the preservation of our historic buildings?
It's not only just important for the preservation of the buildings. There was a piece by Historic England on mental health and well-being, and their research was around people and place. So people who lived in these historic centres generally felt better. And so when you're working in that type of environment and you're passionate about that, work, it's no longer work, is it? You're just going to do something you love. And that's what we are trying to lean into and get people to be encouraged by this. And we're seeing a lot of people in change of careers, where they're getting to their midlife. They've spent 20 years in a profession and they're thinking, well, actually, what's my purpose with all of this? I want to do something that I love, that I'm passionate about. And that then comes out in the importance of preserving these buildings, because people resonate with these buildings in different ways. while I was working at Lincoln Cathedral as their Director of Works and Property, it was quite clear that some people would visit the building because they love the architecture. Some people would visit the building because they had a religious faith, others for the music. So, and some of that stuff is intangible as well, the intangible heritage. An individual who was in World War II, because he was in the RAF, when he flew over Lincoln Cathedral, he knew he was safe, he knew he was at home. And that's a really intangible thing, isn't it? It's never actually visited Lincoln, but just seeing that building on the landscape gave him that personal feeling of safety. And so that's what's important about heritage. That's what's important about preserving these buildings, not only from a practical sense, making sure they're still standing, etc., and maintained, but how people feel about it.
So the traditional skills such as stonemasonry and these skills that go back generations and generations, is it important that we use those traditional skills versus more modern skills when we're preserving these historic buildings?
Yeah, and that's really quite a current theme, actually. So obviously the use of AI is there when it comes to written language and various other things, but we have had for many decades now the use of CNC equipment, so computer-aided equipment, essentially, to help shortcut various processes, traditional processes, so hand tool use of wastage of stone, for example, before you actually get to the good bit, the good carving. And that's been around for decades. And a couple of our members have decided to seek, and to go down a more technological route, and that's brilliant. And there's certainly a market for it, and commercially that's where the market is going. Cathedrals, we feel, have a pastoral need, and an obligation to maintain those traditional skills and that traditional methodology. And our opinion as the CWF is that actually, if you remove the training for those traditional methods, within a generation or two, they are going to be lost. And a big part of not to sound romantic about this, but a big part about crafts is about how people feel when they're doing these things. And the energy and the passion can be seen in what people create. So there is a risk of, if things are automated, if things are taken out of that human aspect, that human touch, that you're going to lose that look, that aesthetic, that feel. And things are then driven by the commercial market, and things are then driven by an economy rather than actually by the love of what it is. So, there's two ways of thinking about it there. There's also, a stonemason could argue that when they handle a piece of stone, they know if it's a good piece of stone or not. An automated system is never going to pick that up because it's just going to do the process. And it just becomes a process-driven method. So, yeah, I mean, there's definitely the need there to maintain the traditional skills for the longer term, and there's arguably a need to just do it that way anyway, regardless. But it just depends on what it is you're trying to achieve. You're trying to achieve something quicker, or you're trying to achieve something in a particular way.
Also, I think it's a nice pull for the cathedrals, isn't it? To have this kind of, for their storytelling. We've got stonemasons working on this project. I think it's another thing that will engage people to come in and see what's going on and the work behind the scenes.
Absolutely. And something that we teach on the CWF Foundation degree is the craftspeople understanding their place within the organisation. Cathedrals are incredibly complex, small charities. They're not big organisations by any stretch of the imagination, but they have everything going on. And so stonemasons, let's pick a trade out, for example. Stonemasons have to understand that it's important that they're engaged in that fundraising aspect. They need to be there, getting the public encouraged and enthusiastic about what they do so that they can donate. Because without those donations, without that income, there is no stonemason's yard, So, and people are going to be more enthusiastic about seeing an individual with a hammer and chisel doing something tangible like that than they are seeing, a piece of equipment just running a saw backwards and forwards.
We've recently partnered with yourselves at the CWF to develop the Benefact Trust Scholars Programme, which will see 36 scholars trained over the next 4 years at the cathedrals that make up the CWF. It will be great if you could talk a bit more around the programme and its impact.
I mean, firstly, thank you. Fantastic transformational project over the next 5 years, which we are very, very excited about. To put it into context, having 36 trainees go through in that time frame is a lot of people. Those individuals trained over that period of time and then retained by those cathedral members is a really long-lasting legacy for that investment. It's really, really significant, not only just to demonstrate the capacity of cathedrals being able to take these individuals on and to complete the work within the cathedral programs, but also to the wider sector to show and demonstrate that there are excellent philanthropic organisations who are willing to donate and invest in people and these places. And I think the cathedrals recognise that, and we're very proud of our association and our strength in our network. And with the Benefact Trust coming on board with that and being part of that partnership only adds to that value.
Brilliant. And what role will the individual cathedrals play in shaping and developing the experiences of the students as they go along this course?
Yeah, so I mean, all of our cathedrals are involved and invested in our programs. Our cathedral members are our tutors. So a trainee who's in Canterbury, for example, they will have setting out training by a master mason in York. They'll have fitting training, stone fittings, and putting stones in the building or repairs, etc. And that'll be by a senior mason in Gloucester. So, the benefit is throughout the whole network coming back to these students. So it doesn't matter where these students are in the UK, they're all going to benefit. And so these people then cross-pollinate when they go back to their works yard and have conversation with an alumni from the previous cohort and say, well, I went to so-and-so to do that training. Oh, well, I went to so-and-so to do that training. And then again, that bounces more ideas off. So, it's a really lovely family network in that sense. And all of the cathedrals contribute, I won't say equally because they're all different sizes with different capacity. Some have got, a team of 5 people, some have got a team of 30 people. And that obviously changes things quite significantly, but they all have bought into and live by the same vision that they need to share that expertise across the cathedral network.
I'd really be keen to know how you think we can encourage more people to train in these traditional craft skills.
Yeah, I mean, it's getting the word out there. And I think, I don't think of myself as old, but I clearly am getting older. And I think certainly technology speaks to that as well. So, when you're thinking about younger people and the platforms that they use, and the way that they communicate and the way that they get information. So getting that information out there and sharing the success stories and piquing the interest and pulling on that passion, I've always said that you do have to be slightly eccentric to work in heritage, because you're not going to get rich overnight. It's difficult. It's not easy. They are really complex projects, and you do have to, as I've mentioned, it's not just practical skills. You have to have that academic aspect as well. You are recruiting from a very small pool of people anyway. And certainly I think, and again, in general construction now, there's a big acknowledgement about neurodiversity and being able to get people, there are a lot of neurodiverse people in construction, but actually being able to pull upon people's diversity, whatever that is, and be able to bring them into an environment where they can express their feelings and emotions through their work, and that creative outlet, I think, is really important. And being able to get people enthusiastic about that, creating opportunities as well. There aren't many large or medium-sized heritage firms in the UK anymore. There's still an awful lot of work. My opinion is having children enthusiastic and almost recruited at a younger age, whereby they can see that there's a viable career path for them, and have that opportunity to do some of that training within a school curriculum, that's enough to be able to pique people's interest and to keep them, focused on it. And that will help, clear some of the skill shortage. Because if you think about an individual who comes out of a GCSE environment, they've got no construction knowledge. They've then got to go on to college. They've then got to go on to university. If you become a conservative, you've got to do a bachelor's. That's another 3 years. So, you're in your 20s. And if you think about 5 years previous, if they had some level of trade application, it's much more viable path then.
As you said, raising awareness seems to be really important. And do you think that's an important aspect of more widely getting people more invested in saving our heritage generally?
Yeah, and I think actually the pandemic, as awful as it was for many people, has helped some individuals think, well, actually, look, this is not the work I want to do. I do want to do something, credible, tangible, something I'm passionate about. And we have seen that over the last few years, individuals who've made that career change. Let's not beat around the bush. When you're talking about crafts that have literally, there's only 1 or 2 companies that are executing that work, it's clearly viable. It just needs to have more people doing it, and that investment into it to be able to do it, and having those pathways for younger people to clearly see that route forward. That's what really needs to be done at a governmental level.
Definitely. So this might be a bit of a big question, but looking to the future, what would you say a thriving heritage sector looks like, and what could we do to get there?
Wow. Yeah. That is a big question. I think people are very focused at the moment on, having short-term impacts with programs which are, creating leverage to have people trained. But actually it's around organizational resilience and being able to create environments where training is just part of the system. Individuals who are identified at pre-GCSE maybe not struggle academically, but they don't apply themselves in that way. Clearly very bright, but they just need to have a creative outlet or a practical outlet. Having a route to entry that way, which goes back to the old school apprenticeship model, really, that people go through that system and they have a job and they've got that permanence with that job, and the employers are there and they know that they've got that loyalty, between both parties. So I think creating that type of environment would really lift heritage and construction in general, and be able to ensure that you have those individuals who are going to pass on those skills. We can open the doors and we can say, well, we're going to flood the market with millions of pounds and have loads of new people coming through. But who's actually training those new people? And if you've got ratios of 1-to-1 of trainee to trainer, there's no productive work being done. So we need to improve the organizational level to have people there before you can start flooding the market with new people. So I think that organizational resilience is really important, and training trainers to be able to enable the next people to come along.
Yeah, because it is quite a scary prospect. If these skills aren't getting passed on, that, we've got such a rich heritage in the UK. And if we couldn't maintain that, that is quite scary, I think. So I think courses like this and the programs that you offer is so vital to ensure that we can keep that heritage alive.
Yeah, well, thank you. And we're not on our own. There are many other organisations who are providing courses. We are unique in the sense that it is the cathedrals, and we are unique with the level 4 and level 5. But our strength actually is in that collaboration and that partnership for a wider sector. There's so much work out there. We need to stop thinking of ourselves as being in competition all the time, because the more collaboratively we work, the more work that's created, and therefore, it doesn't become as competitive.
It's really interesting you say that, because virtually every podcast episode that we've done, whether it's been charities or churches or different organisations, collaboration has been pretty much the theme throughout, that if we all worked harder towards the same goal and together, then actually massive change could happen. So
yeah, and interestingly, there's a group of us who seem to be in the same place all the time. We go to an event and it's like, oh, it's you again, which is great because it's the same individuals who are pushing the same agenda. They have the same vision, and that's fantastic. And I'm not going to name names because I'll end up forgetting one or two of them. But they all know who they are if they're listening to this. And I think actually there's a real positive momentum at the moment with the right people being in the right places, as in organizations or levels of organizations at a government level and otherwise private and public sectors, and actually sort of getting to the resolution of saying, well, look, enough's enough. We've talked about the skills shortage for long enough. How can we actually make an impact, and how can we make this better? How can we learn from one another? And certainly something that I've, over the last year or so, heard more of is the CWF being a good model for apprenticeships. We've had our name mentioned twice now with DCMS at parliamentary talks by various individuals, and then talking about the model and how people could benefit from our model, and how we could maybe roll that out in other ways. And we're more than open to that. You know, it's not something that we should be keeping to ourselves if we know that we can make a greater improvement.
brilliant. Thank you, Michael. It's been great speaking to you and learnt a lot. So I hope you enjoyed being on the podcast.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for joining us for another episode of Beyond Funding. If you'd like to find out more about the CWF, visit cwfcathedrals.co.uk. And to find out more about Benefact Trust, visit benefacttrust.co.uk. And as usual, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube and Spotify channels so you don't miss out on future episodes.